The lighter snapped sharply as my uncle lit a Marlboro, its smoke curling into the late summer breeze that swept across the backyard, larger than the entire apartment I was renting. Laughter erupted after my dad's latest joke. He tilted his Bud Light toward me, raising his voice. He says he's building something in the virtual universe. Internet money, sound familiar? Someone should introduce it to the real world already. The crowd roared. I kept a straight face while everyone clapped at the performance. My grandmother, almost 80, chuckled too, though I was sure she had no idea what they were talking about. I caught Ricky, my cousin, lean in and whisper to his girlfriend. That's the blockchain genius. Still in that old basement apartment, with Wi-Fi slower than Grandma's TV antenna used to be. I gave a faint nod as if I were laughing with them, but inside, their words stung worse than the warm beer in my hand. My name's Dylan, 29, a self-taught developer living in Fort Worth, Texas. For 6 years, I'd been building a decentralized trading platform from a tiny apartment barely 400 square feet, where sometimes even the tap water refused to run warm. I didn't drive a luxury car, didn't wear designer clothes. To them, I was still the idle nephew who hadn't landed a real job. I remembered the last family gathering, my dad's birthday party in Garland. Same old questions. So when are you getting a real job, son? That crypto whatever thing, is it at least covering your rent yet? I smiled, avoided eye contact, took a sip of beer, and nodded like I always did. What they didn't know, and what I had no intention of telling them, was that just yesterday I received a final acquisition offer from an investment firm in Frankfurt. They wanted to buy my platform for $24 million with founder equity rights. I slid my phone back into my coat pocket and stayed silent. Not because I was timid or unsure. I simply had nothing left to prove to people who never tried to understand. My Aunt Nancy, near the grill, turned to my dad. Hey Frank, why not get Dylan to work with my husband at the bank? He clearly hasn't found stability yet. I heard my dad sigh. I know, but Dylan, he likes working with those computers. Some kind of digital magic or something. There's no future in it. Under the soft yellow string lights, I watched him say that, as if he'd finished a trial, and I was the defendant. I downed the rest of my beer and quietly walked toward the fence. The moon was high, casting a long shadow of my body across the grass. No one noticed me leaving. They were too busy talking about my cousin's new SUV. He just got promoted at a logistics company. I wasn't jealous, I just felt hollow. Driving home, I turned on the radio but switched it off within seconds. The silence made it easier to hear my heartbeat. Steady, yet heavy. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister Valerie. Don't mind what Dad said, he just worries about you. I didn't respond. I'd grown used to that kind of worry, the kind that hides judgment under the mask of love. When I got back to my apartment, the hallway lights flickered as usual. I opened my laptop, logged into my crypto wallet, and saw the number, $24,128,000. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just felt quiet. After 6 years, the fire inside me wasn't anger anymore. It had turned into cold steel. I shut the screen, leaned back in my chair, and wondered. If they knew the truth tomorrow, would anything change? The silver Toshiba laptop with chipped edges was something my mom had bought second-hand in Plano for $80. No webcam, the number 2 key jammed, and a battery so dead it had to stay plugged in all the time. But to the 14-year-old boy with long hair and an unexplainable obsession with code, it was a gateway to the universe. While other kids were into Madden, NFL, or secretly downloading action movies, I was hiding in my room, firing up a clunky IDE, teaching myself how to write my first Python script. At first just printing "Hello Dylan" on a black screen. Then I moved to sorting algorithms, then bot scripts for games. The deeper I explored, the more I realized that some things existed beyond the boundaries of school. My dad didn't see it that way. Turn that thing off. Why are you glued to that metal box all day? He was a retired construction engineer, a man who believed real value had to be touched. Bricks, steel, cement, cash. The night I joined an online developer forum, he burst into my room, yanked the power cord, and snapped. If you don't sleep, don't bother going to school tomorrow. I said nothing, maybe because I was too young to push back. That silence lasted for years. I got into the University of Texas at Arlington majoring in computer science. My parents didn't congratulate me. They just said, "At least now, you're stepping into the real world." I studied hard during my first 2 years. GPA hit 3.8. I even made the dean's list. But everything shifted at the end of sophomore year, when I attended an open blockchain seminar in Austin. The speaker, a guy around 40 in a wrinkled shirt, explained how he and his team were helping people in Kenya send money across borders without banks. I didn't take a single note during the 90-minute talk, but ideas began to ignite in my head. What he said wasn't a dream. It was reality. A path. A tool that, if done right, could shift the world. I skipped my best friend's birthday that night, went back to my dorm, opened GitHub, and started reading source code from Ethereum and Monero. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I emailed to request a 1-week leave but never went back. My mom cried until her voice gave out. Dad didn't call. Valerie tried to mediate, but the rest of the family wouldn't listen. "You're throwing your future away for some digital bubble," my dad shouted, the only time he called me afterward. I moved out of the dorm and into a cheap apartment near Trinity Mill Station. I survived on freelance gigs, mostly coding for small startups. At night, I buried myself in Solidity, dissecting smart contract vulnerabilities. Sometimes I was exhausted. Internet cut out, food ran low. I often fell asleep at my desk because the code refused to compile. I even sold my Beats Studio headphones, Mom's only birthday gift, just to pay the electricity bill. I didn't tell anyone, not out of pride, but because I couldn't bear another "I told you so." 3 years passed, like that. The code grew more complex, the product more refined. I called it Clearbit, an automated crypto transaction protocol with a hybrid consensus of proof of stake and proof of reputation. It was small, unknown, but stable. Most importantly, it never once failed to sync, something even the biggest platforms struggled with. When I got the first offer to buy Clearbit, I thought it was spam, but the email came from a Berlin-based investment fund with a verified digital signature. They wanted a Zoom meeting, 18 minutes long. No fluff, just this. "We've been tracking Clearbit for nearly 2 months. This is something our industry hasn't seen before. Dylan, are you ready to talk about the future?" I nodded. They didn't know I'd been speaking about the future since I was 14. Just no one had ever listened. Every morning, I woke before sunrise. Not because of alarms, but because of hunger pangs from last night's instant noodles. The studio apartment sat on the 3rd floor of a rundown building in North Fort Worth. The wood floor creaked. The AC wheezed like a dying animal. The outlets sparked if you weren't careful. I lived there for nearly 6 years. No one came to visit. No one called to grab dinner, have drinks, or go on trips. My college friends slowly drifted away like autumn leaves, partly because they didn't understand what I was doing, partly because they had settled into office jobs. Wedding invitations arriving by email more and more often. I didn't blame them. Didn't feel sad either. There wasn't room for casual friendships when you spent over 18 hours a day fixing every line of code, debugging data packets, checking each block process so that not a single error could slip through. Each meal was measured by how quickly I could refuel without leaving my chair. Instant coffee, ramen, dry cereal, sandwiches hard as bricks. Some days I forgot to brush my teeth. My eyes were bloodshot from sleepless nights. My hands trembled from exhaustion. My neck felt like a tightened violin string. But I kept going, typing, correcting, testing again. Clearbit grew in the dark, like a living thing, complex, sensitive, unforgiving of the slightest flaw. I rebuilt the entire consensus structure, scrapped proof of work due to energy costs, completely avoided Ethereum's popular algorithms. Instead, I developed a trust-based scoring system built on transaction history and long-term reliability. Sometimes, I thought I was inventing something that would be forgotten in a few months. Then one day, I posted the white paper on a technical forum. No promotion, no name attached, just sharing what I'd created. 36 hours later, my inbox was overflowing. Someone named Alexis from StratEdge Capital sent a brief email. "We've been monitoring Clearbit. If you're open to a conversation, please share your availability." I thought it was a prank, but when they sent over an NDA and the IP traced back to New York, I realized things were taking a new turn. 1 week later, the first video call happened. I sat in front of my old webcam, wearing a faded t-shirt, facing 5 professionally dressed people, one of whom was a former lead engineer at IBM. "We believe your protocol has real-world potential in global financial platforms. Parallel transaction processing at this speed with this level of decentralization. No one's achieved that." I didn't reply right away. They continued. "If you're interested, we'd like to submit an initial offer, just a number to consider." I gave a small nod. The next day, I received an email. $4.7 million for full ownership of the platform, with no executive role retained. I stared at the screen for a long time, not because I was unsure, but because I saw my father in my mind, dragging his chair out each night to watch the local news, grumbling about lost dreamers, accepting that money would mean stepping away from something I had lived and breathed for 6 years. I declined. 6 weeks later, 4 more funds made new offers. One of them, Inviax Ventures, an Asian venture capital firm, offered over $12 million. I still didn't say yes. I wasn't finished. Amid Zoom calls, proposals, and names I'd only seen in finance magazines, I stayed at my desk each night, checking code, cleaning up stray characters, reading anonymous developer feedback on GitHub. In fact, then came a Monday morning, an email from Lyria Capital. They wanted to meet that day. On their side, a legal rep and 2 senior blockchain engineers. After nearly an hour of analysis, they made their final pitch. "If you're willing to transfer ownership and sign a 2-year advisory agreement, we'll offer $23.8 million, paid in US dollars, not crypto, plus a guaranteed annual retainer of $220,000. But we need your decision within 48 hours. I didn't rush. I walked around the neighborhood, past the old laundromat, the corner store run by a Mexican family whose dog always slept out front, until I sat down on a park bench where I once spent the night during a blackout. In that quiet, I realized I didn't need anyone's validation anymore. Only one question remained. How do you step out of the dark without losing yourself? That afternoon, rain came down in sheets, pounding the apartment's tin roof like a war drum. I sat still in front of my laptop. The subject line of the email still glowed. Offer, $27.5 million US dollars, plus 2-year advisory contract. Below it, the digital signature of Lane Whitaker, COO of Lyria Capital, the fintech giant expanding across Europe. I didn't open the attachment. Instead, I shut the laptop, stood up, and walked into the hallway where the wet floorboards creaked beneath my feet. No umbrella. I walked through puddled streets, past an old Korean restaurant with paper lanterns swaying under dim light. Horns honked. Voices argued over a splash of water. Somewhere, kids laughed while kicking a ball, all moving in a rhythm I'd long left behind. No one in my family knew I had already turned down 3 previous offers, the first from $3 million from a California fund for a full buyout with no leadership role. I laughed and deleted it. 6 weeks later, a Singapore firm offered $8 million with a management post in Bangkok. I declined again. When a Swiss group reached $15 million, I sat 3 hours thinking. But I typed, "I'm not ready to sell." Not because of the money, but because the work wasn't done. The fourth offer, Lyria's, was different. They didn't just see technical value, they understood the internal logic. They even spotted a minor bug in the beta release I had missed. No flattery, no lofty promises, just clear terms, $27.5 million upfront, plus a 2-year advisory contract at $180,000 annually, remote, no operational duties. I returned home as night fell, logged into my email, clicked the DocuSign link. The screen said, "Review and sign." My hand hovered. An hour passed, then another. The screen dimmed, then lit up again. I entered the code, signed, and pressed complete. The confirmation arrived within seconds. I didn't cheer, didn't celebrate. I leaned back in my chair, watching yellow light spill from the buildings across the street. I had expected triumph. It felt more like closure. For 6 years, this project had been my pulse, my reason to stay awake on empty stomachs. Now, as the code prepared to belong to someone else, I didn't feel relief, just a hollow space. People always said, success changes everything, but around me, nothing changed. Same cracked walls, same wobbling ceiling fan. I called Valerie, my sister, but ended the call before it rang. Not because I didn't trust her. I just didn't know where to begin. Do you say, the kid everyone dismissed just sold a company for over $27 million? Or, the family's so-called burden now advises a major investment firm? No one understood what I'd built. They only saw a skinny guy in cheap clothes with nothing flashy to show. At Dad's birthday last month, Uncle Kent had patted me on the shoulder and joked, "Don't worry, kid, you'll find your footing once you drop that internet fantasy." If I had smiled without comment, they had no idea I had already turned down more than double Kent's lifetime salary. The next morning, Lyria called. They congratulated me, confirmed the contract was in effect, and said the wire would land within 24 hours. Kayla, the assistant, sounded genuinely excited. "You're officially the founder of the first decentralized company Lyria has fully acquired in North America. Time to celebrate." I didn't answer right away. I looked at my cold coffee, then said, "I'll celebrate in my own way." After the call, I opened my crypto wallet, watched the balance climb, then closed it. No social posts, no bragging texts. I sat in silence, watching the rain fall again, gentle, silent, almost respectful, as if the world was bowing its head in acknowledgement. Or maybe no one else noticed at all. I was used to that, because everything truly worth something always begins in silence. 2 days after the $27 million hit my account, I left the old apartment with nothing but 3 USBs, a worn-out notebook, and my phone. I left everything else, the cracked office chair, the rusted kettle, exactly as they were. No regret, no sentiment. They were witnesses, not baggage. I moved into a small place in West Dallas. Not luxurious, but quiet. Private enough to begin what came next. The first task wasn't buying a new car or booking a trip somewhere sunny. It was meeting a woman in her 50s, with wireframe glasses and a no-nonsense tone. Evelyn Rains. Expert in private foundations and anonymous charitable accounts, she had worked with pro athletes and lottery winners who didn't want attention. I slid the draft plan toward her. Evelyn read it once, then looked up. "You don't want your name on anything?" I gave a quiet yes. "What about the recipients? What if they ask?" "They won't know. I just need them to get help at the right time." Ellen paused for a moment, then smiled. "I can do that." We established 3 anonymous funds, each registered in a different state to make tracking more difficult. One healthcare fund for elderly laborers in Fort Worth, one scholarship fund aimed at elementary school students from low-income families with a passion for technology, and one emergency fund for families facing unexpected financial crises. 3 weeks later, I heard from Valerie that Dad needed knee surgery. Arthritis made walking difficult, and insurance would only cover a small portion. Valerie had dipped into her savings, but they were still short about $17,000. "Don't tell Dad. He won't accept it if he thinks it's from you. You know how he is," she said, her voice tired. I told her to wait. That evening, I submitted his file to the healthcare fund, citing qualified by income and age group. 3 days later, the hospital called to confirm that the entire cost had been covered by the fund. Valerie texted. He nearly cried when he got the call, thought it was some kind of miracle. I replied with one word, good. Not long after, Emma, Valerie's daughter, was told by her orthodontist that she needed braces soon or it could affect her jaw alignment. The cost was nearly $8,000. My sister applied for a dental scholarship through the school. I had Evelyn set up a new fund targeting students in Emma's district, matching the right age, and had the approval emailed directly through the school. 2 weeks later, Valerie called, half laughing, half crying. "I can't believe it. Emma got picked. Full coverage. And there's even a thank you letter from the principal." I paused for a moment before asking, "Do you feel a little lighter now?" "More than a little. Everything feels like someone's watching over us." That sentence stirred something in me. Not pride, but the realization that what mattered wasn't whether they knew who helped. What mattered was that they no longer felt alone. A month later, I got a call from Uncle Ben, Dad's younger brother, his voice shaking with emotion. The old family farm, where 3 generations had lived, was about to be foreclosed over unpaid property taxes. They had been raising money for half a year, but were still short nearly $42,000. In my next email to Evelyn, I attached the farm's address, the outstanding amount, and one line of instruction: strictly anonymous. Less than 48 hours later, the tax balance was cleared. The family threw a small celebration for what they called a miracle donation from an unknown community fund, Valerie later told me. Dad stood in front of the land map and said Grandpa must be looking out for us. Everyone guessed it was Kyle, the cousin who works in finance. He just laughed and shook his head. I didn't go to the party. Didn't look at the photos in the family chat. I just sat in my quiet apartment, opened my laptop, and saw Evelyn's message. All transfers completed, no suspicion, everything running smoothly. I replied, "Keep it going, we're not done," because there was more work to do. Not to be thanked, but so that each member of my family could stand tall, never realizing the hand that quietly lifted them had once been seen as the family's lost cause. That evening, Valerie called in a softer tone than usual. "Dylan, do you have a minute? Something strange is going on." I leaned back in my chair, eyes still on the Clearbit upgrade logs. "What's up?" She paused, then whispered like someone might overhear. "Derek thinks someone's helping the family, quietly. Like someone who knows details we haven't told anyone." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "The fund that covered Dad's surgery, Emma's braces scholarship, now the farm taxes. Don't you think it's all happening a little too fast?" I braced myself on the desk, kept my voice even. "Maybe we're just lucky." "Derek doesn't think so. You know how he is. Rarely looks deep into things, but this time he looked at me and said, 'What if it's Dylan?'" I let out a small laugh, though my mind was racing. "And what did you say?" I changed the subject. "But Dylan, I think you should be ready." I ended the call, stood up, and walked onto the balcony. The air was crisp. Wind slipped through the iron railing, stirring dry leaves across the floor. Under the dim yellow light, the city felt like it was holding its breath, listening to mine. The next morning, Dad sent me a short message. "I'm home for dinner this weekend. We need to talk." Those 4 words held me still for a long time. In 6 years, he'd never written anything so direct. I called him back. He didn't answer. Saturday night, I drove back to Garland. The house was the same. Mom's low rose bushes in front, the dark wooden door slightly sagging on its hinges. Valerie opened the door. She looked at me, half smiling, half worried. "You ready for this?" I nodded. Dinner was quieter than usual. No noisy stories or awkward jokes. Dad ate slowly, glancing at me now and then. After we cleared the table, he pulled a stack of papers from the drawer and placed them in front of me. This week I read some things. Started with an article about digital money. I looked down. A blockchain diagram. Terms like smart contract, tokenomics, highlighted in green marker. Hard to follow, but I wanted to try. I want to understand what you really do. Mom sat beside him silently. Valerie washed dishes quietly. I gripped the edge of the table. That one question, simple as it sounded, was what I'd waited my entire youth to hear from him. I started explaining, not with jargon, but with the simplest analogies. I compared blockchain to a ledger that couldn't be torn, each transaction a line of ink that couldn't be erased. I talked about cutting out middlemen, about people around the world exchanging value not through trust in each other, but in the code. Dad leaned back in his chair, listening without interrupting. Mom nodded instinctively, as if trying to keep up. When I finished, he said, "I used to think you were chasing a fantasy. Now, I'm not sure I was right, but I'm not sure I was wrong either." I didn't say anything. Everything happening to this family lately, it's made me think. I don't know who's helping, but if that person understands our problems this well, it must be someone close. His voice cracked slightly. If it's you, I want to say thank you. Not for the money, but for not giving up on us, even when we dismissed you. I lowered my head. I wasn't sure what I was feeling, just that something heavy in my chest finally felt lighter. As I prepared to leave, Dad walked me to the car. He placed his hand on my shoulder. Small gesture, but one that said more than words ever could. If you're free, drop by once a month, okay? I looked at him, didn't smile, didn't nod, just lifted my key fob and unlocked the car. But just before stepping inside, I said something I hadn't planned. Dad, want to try investing a little in stable coins? I can walk you through it. He let out a short, raspy laugh, probably the first genuine laugh between us in nearly 7 years. That night, I slept soundly, as if the quiet fever that had simmered in my chest for years had finally broken. Recognition without applause or fanfare, that sometimes looked like a hand gently resting on your shoulder. That afternoon, I met Valerie at a small cafe in downtown Plano, the same one where we used to grab a Sunday breakfast back in high school. She arrived on time, her face tense, visibly thinner after months of worrying about Dad. I placed a thin file in front of her, light brown cover, no name, just one printed line, trust deed, Emma's education. Valerie opened it. Her eyes moved slowly across the lines. Her expression changed. Dylan, is this real? I nodded. Not just her high school tuition, all college costs too, fully covered. The transfer's complete. She stared at me, eyes welling. Where did you get the money? What are you doing? I smiled, pulled a tech magazine from my backpack, flipped to the centerfold, a photo of me. In a faded hoodie, standing between two Lyria Capital investors. The headline below read, Clearbit founder steps out of the shadows with a $27.5 million deal. Valerie froze. She set the paper down, leaned back in her chair, speechless for over a minute. You're the one behind all of it? The scholarships, the farm, Dad's surgery? I spoke softly. I didn't want anyone to know. But now, it's time someone helped tell the story, right? She squeezed my hand. You trust me with this? More than anyone. 2 days later, she started simple, sharing the Clearbit article on Facebook with a casual caption, Love seeing young people succeed without needing a spotlight. The whole family liked the post, but no one connected the name, Dylan Cooper, with the quiet brother they'd known for years. That night, Derek, her husband, knocked on my office door. I saw that article Valerie posted. That guy looks familiar. I propped my chin on my hand. Could be. Derek squinted. He looks like you, but it can't be, right? I changed the subject. Asked about the Cowboys. He shook his head, half laughed. It's fine, but if it is you, I just want to say, you don't need to keep it hidden forever. A week later, Valerie called. Emma's school is hosting Career Day on Friday. They're short on tech speakers. I told the principal someone in our family once sold a startup. She's excited. I was about to decline, but she added, Mom and Dad will be there, Derek too. You don't have to explain everything. Just let them see who you've become. Friday morning, I wore a gray shirt and black jeans, walking into Harvest Hill Elementary with my heart pounding. Emma stood in the hallway, holding a name badge. When she saw me, she bounced up. Uncle Dylan, my teacher said I'm the first student here with an uncle who's been in a magazine. The small auditorium was packed, students up front, parents and teachers in back. I took a deep breath and stood. Hi everyone. When I was your age, I thought success meant wearing suits, driving luxury cars and working in tall glass buildings. But later I learned, not everyone takes that path. I told my story, about coding late nights on a laptop with a broken hinge, writing lines of code no one understood for years, choosing between meals and server bills. When I reached the sentence, and the company I built was acquired for $27.5 million, the room fell completely silent. Dad, sitting in the second row, jolted upright. Mom gasped, clutching her armrest. Derek stared at me. Valerie smiled, her eyes glistening. I continued, but the achievement I value most isn't the money. It's using it to help the right people at the right time. Like helping this school build a new computer lab so every student can learn to code if they want to. The class erupted. Emma looked at me like I was a superhero. When I stepped down from the stage, Dad stood before I could sit. He walked toward me slowly and held out his hand. You really kept this quiet, but I'm proud of you. I shook his hand, said nothing. In that moment, no words were needed. 3 weeks after career day, I took my parents to see a new house in the western suburbs of Richardson. 1-story, craftsman-style roof, lavender-filled front yard, no steps. Easier for Dad post-surgery. At first, they thought it was just a tour. When the agent handed me the keys, Mom turned to me. How did you open the door? I placed the deed on the kitchen counter. Your names are on the title. Taxes for the first year are paid. If you want to move in, it's ready by next week. Mom pressed her hand to her chest, lips trembling. Dad didn't say anything. He walked through each room, then came back and asked softly, You sure? This is a big deal. I nodded. I didn't buy this to be thanked. I just want you two to live somewhere easier. They moved in 2 weeks later. I hired full-service movers. Valerie directed everything. Derek hauled boxes. Emma ran from room to room snapping selfies. The new house quickly filled with laughter and the smell of cinnamon rolls Mom baked every weekend. Valerie, who'd always stood between storms, got a gift of her own. I funded her to leave the old accounting firm where she'd been overworked for years. Her business license was approved within a month, and Harper & Cooper Financial Solutions opened its doors in a modest office near Spring Valley Road. I didn't attend the grand opening. Valerie knew why. She just texted me. You helped me get started. Let me prove the rest. One evening, while we were eating in the backyard, Derek pulled his chair closer as Emma and Mom watched TikTok videos. I just signed up for an online course on basic coding, Python. Could you help when you have time? I nearly laughed. Derek, the same guy who once called coding foggy as San Francisco mist, was now holding a notebook writing out lines of code. I nodded. Lifetime tech support as long as you don't ask to build a blockchain on day one. He laughed loudly and tapped his soda can against mine, like a pact between soldiers in the same trench. Late that night, I got an email from an investment fund in Berlin. They invited me to be a senior advisor with a compensation nearly double. Hilarious. Contract was ready. Just needed a signature. I read it 5 times. No errors, no hidden clauses. Very tempting, but I didn't reply. I closed the laptop, stood up, and walked into the yard. Under the old oak, Dad sat in a folding chair, holding a beginner's guide to blockchain. I sat beside him. He tilted his head. What's a testnet account again? Why not just use real ones? I explained slowly. He nodded. Turns out it's not as complicated as I thought. Then he went quiet. The wind rustled the leaves. Finally, he said, I often think about back then, when I tried so hard to make you follow the path I understood. Now, if you'd listened, we wouldn't be sitting here like this. I looked toward the kitchen window where warm yellow light glowed. Inside were Mom, Emma, and Valerie, laughing over a batch of half-burnt cookies. Dad placed his hand on my shoulder. I'm not worried anymore that you're different from everyone. I was afraid I wasn't smart enough to understand what you were doing. But now, I don't need to understand it all. I just need to know you're not alone. I stayed silent, not because I had nothing to say, but because his words made up for the thousands of days I lived unseen. That night, I didn't open my laptop. I didn't check the markets. I just sat on the porch, listening to Mom call everyone in for fruit, to Derek cursing over a wrong line of code, and to Dad shifting in his chair and mumbling. Stablecoin, kind of like a savings account, huh? Everything kept moving, but unlike before, I no longer had to push alone. People say success means having money, but I've come to understand the true value of success is when those who once doubted you stand beside you, not out of admiration, but because they finally understand. From a young man dismissed by his family for chasing unrealistic tech, Dylan quietly built a blockchain platform worth tens of millions. Instead of bragging, he chose to help his loved ones anonymously, watching as their perceptions slowly changed. His greatest success wasn't the wealth, but regaining the trust and respect of a family that once turned away from him. With quiet determination, unwavering effort, and no need for applause, what do you think about Dylan's choices and how he changed his family's perspective? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel to discover more heartfelt stories of ordinary people transforming their lives.